I titled today's Neville Goddard conversation, Change Can Happen Effortlessly. The premise of this conversation is this quote here from his book, The Power of Awareness, in which he states, "The principle of least action governs everything in physics, from the path of a planet to the path of a pulse of light. Least action is the minimum of energy multiplied by the minimum of time. Therefore, in moving from your present state to the state desired, you must use the minimum of energy and take the shortest possible time. Your journey from one side of consciousness to another is a psychological one. So to make the journey, you must employ the psychological equivalent of least action. And the psychological equivalent is mere assumption." Now let's reflect upon this very deeply. I have a belief, and the belief is something that I have continued to encourage within myself over the years. And as entrepreneurs, as innovators, as artists, I encourage this belief because I've seen the effects play out all throughout the years. I started this journey in 2009 as far as entrepreneurship goes. And the belief that I have, which I continue to encourage within myself, and if it resonates with you, I would also encourage it, is that everything shows up in a mutual beneficial way to achieve my vision, and I see my vision in harmony with the vision of others. This removes a lot of internal resistance, stress, frustration in mine, which plays out as the journey to realizing the entrepreneurial success or the creative expression from a place of flow. Now, when he speaks of journey from one state of consciousness to another, which plays out as the theater or expression as journey in life, and relates it over to mere assumption, if we can encourage certain thinking processes, then all change as far as our behaviors go, our skills go, our environment, everything, our relationship with others, happens effortlessly, flow-based. And if for whatever the reason may be, we experience friction via the expression from within, then we can practice more of what we're going to talk about in this video. So, a couple things I want to share in relation to this is a story. So I started this channel actually in 2013 when I was transitioning away from my IT business, and I got rid of almost everything. And I fit my possessions in a backpack in which I went to Europe to live with my girlfriend at the time. Now, I actually made a video spontaneously. It just showed up. A hunch and inspiration showed up to make this video talking about what was actually in my backpack, and that's the start of this channel 9 years ago when I made that video, 2013. And I started to get more involved with management consulting. Having my IT background from corporate, and also having built my own IT business, being a fan of logistics, warehouse management systems, and operations and management, qualified me to, very reasonably so, to get involved with management consulting, which is what I was getting involved with more so while I was doing some other things on the side, like putting together these videos to share my experiences and to discuss. And we still do it till this day. Now we do 3 videos a week. What I realized that it is true in regards to my belief that some way, somehow, whatever ideas, hunches, inspirations, people, environment, circumstance, information shows up in a mutually beneficial way. And all I do is allow myself to express. Now, this ties into the moving from one psychological state by least action, which is psychological assumption, interpretations, perspectives, ideas that we identify with, is creating all this theater. And every single day that goes by, I recognize that I am the source of all of this that appears, more so. Now, in the earlier stages, this might have been a tough pill to swallow. And like we do with all tough pills, we use a pill cutter and we cut it up into small pieces. See, let's work with this. You have an idea, a goal, a vision, something that you desire to see brought forth. We're taught to assume it as done, go into our imagination, do the act of seeing ourselves at the end already achieving that what we desire, and assume from that day onwards we have changed. Now, a person might look at the five sensory experience, the outer world, and the different aspects of the journey, and might start to identify with certain kinds of thinking patterns in which they relate it over to denial or contradiction in relation to the vision in regards to whatever shows up. So he says, therefore, you must turn from the objective appearance of things to the subjective center of things, your consciousness. If you truly desire to know the cause of the phenomena of life and how to use the knowledge to realize your fondest dreams, in the midst of the apparent contradictions, antagonisms, and contrasts of your life, there's only one principle at work, only your consciousness operating. Difference does not consist in variety of substance, but in the variety of arrangement of the same cause substance, your consciousness. So, doubt-based thinking, fear-based thinking, indecision-based thinking, and any kind of interpretations in relation to this five sensory experience being in contradiction or denial of your vision, I would suggest evaluating that thinking. I mean, looking at it from a really, is this really true perspective? Asking that question, is this really true? If we're identifying more so every day with imagination being the cause, what we say I am too being the cause, then what we'll notice is we'll find ourselves being less reactive to the five sensory experience. If things were to show up, realizing that all of that reactivity is programming within ourselves. And it is an opportunity then, and I see it as an opportunity to change the thinking. That's the effortless change, the thinking. That's the least action. And the psychological equivalent to that is mere assumption. I assume myself to be a certain way. A person goes down the journey of building a business and maybe they're encountering some of that programming, some kind of doubt. Let's actually look at some kind of doubt-based thinking here. People criticize me and put me down. It's too difficult and complicated. There are factors beyond my control that sabotage me. We're taught that acceptance of the end wills the means. Now, if acceptance of the end wills the means, then what are these aspects here, this kind of thinking? People will put me down. It's too difficult and complicated. There are factors beyond my control that sabotage me. These are thinking patterns that, for whatever the reason, we learn them. We learn them and we identified with them and we assume, although unconsciously, we assume that these aspects are related to the journey to realizing our vision. We don't need to shame ourselves about that. We want to understand ourselves and say, we don't have to identify with this kind of thinking. We could assume what is true and accurate to the vision. He says, attention is forceful in proportion to the narrowness of its focus. That is, when it is obsessed with a single idea or sensation. It is steadied and powerfully focused only by such an adjustment of the mind as permits you to see one thing only. For you steady the attention and increase its power by confining it. See, I'm a fan of the destination and I'm also a fan of the journey. And what I mean by that is I enjoyed the journey as much as the destination. When I look back at earlier stages of my life, bringing forth success in different areas, I realized that I could have actually had taken time to reflect upon certain thinking patterns that I was having. And I could have made peace with those thinking patterns on the journey. So I believe the journey is as valuable as the destination for many reasons, and one of the reasons why is because it provides opportunity for cause and effect reflection. If I'm feeling the effects of force and stress and frustration and unnecessary complexity in relation to people, environment, circumstance, and information, then I go back to the cause within myself and say, what am I assuming? What am I thinking? What am I believing? What perspectives, what interpretations am I identifying with? And through the inner dialogue and the power of the subconscious mind, it's brought to the surface. We call this understanding. Becoming more aware each day, and we are becoming more conscious of what's within the subconscious realm, we can actually encourage it through the cause and effect reflection by valuing the journey. And although the end wills the means, I also suggest that the journey reveals interpretations which, when resolved, when made peace with, such as these attributes here, the next journey to success will be a lot easier, flow-based, joyous, peaceful. Because we don't experience this kind of theater playing out on the journey because we've resolved it within ourselves. So, they say, and being a student of entrepreneurship for many years, you start to see patterns in relation to thinking and relating it over to results in yourself and others. And one of the things that is brought up a lot when it comes to entrepreneurship, as a matter of fact, I was listening to some Brian Tracy audios yesterday because I really enjoy his stuff. I was listening to his stuff since 2005. He said that those that have built a business tend to find it easier to build the next business. One of the reasons why is because of the changes that are occurring within the individual. They're starting to see things for how they really are, which is what I've been saying in many different ways all throughout our videos. And I will continue to say this because I would like to further encourage it, that everything is in harmony and in contribution to your vision. Reality is rearranging some way, somehow, and there are known ways and unknown ways. And what we want to do is practice faith. So we actually have an opportunity to practice dwelling in and from the ideal state of mind, the one that's in harmony with the vision. By anytime we feel reactive, to go within ourselves, and you can do it real time in the moment. You get better at it with practice, or at the end of the night. And leave this world alone for those moments and go into your imagination and see yourself at the end. Or say something that would imply that you are that person. For example, if the thinking process is, people put me down, something that could bring themselves back into the feeling of the wish fulfilled is an inner dialogue that may go something like this. And this is what I've worked with. The past does not define me. Who I am is my vision, and thus I'm able to experience it every day as I interact with people. I see people accepting me and lifting me up. Now, immediately, if that statement resonates with you, it brings you into the feeling of the wish fulfilled, right then and there. And we get better at it with practice. Now, here's the thing. After a few times or maybe a bunch of times of looking at things like how I just shared, from how it actually is, which is in harmony and in contribution to your vision, it becomes automatic. You don't have these thoughts. You go about your day to day. You automatically express. what I noticed is that from 2013 onwards, after building the business successfully from 2009 to 13, I pretty much was in a fork in the road, you could say, or really I had a preference in the manner. Do I want to scale this IT business to a whole nother level? Interestingly enough, I worked with clients during management consulting who did go down that pathway. They actually chose to stay and scale their IT business over to, levels higher. I personally didn't feel a desire to do it anymore, so I shifted. I wanted to get into consulting, so I did. And everything that I learned from 2009 to 13 played a role. Remember I said in the beginning that I have a belief. Everything shows up in a mutually beneficial way to achieve my vision. And I see my vision in harmony with the vision of others. So everything I've learned then brought me to where I am right now, which allows me to automatically express, not have this kind of thinking within me, that it's too difficult and complicated. I actually enjoy the next stage of journey that I'm on. I don't believe that there are factors beyond my control that sabotage me, and I don't believe that people put me down. People may offer me some optimization data, some insights and perspectives, some ideas in which I understand from within and still relate it over to my vision. So you see the nuances of difference. And by nuance, I mean slight variation of thinking in relation to. Now, the power behind this is the recognition that everything you're experiencing on the journey to realizing your vision is actually part of the journey to realizing your vision. And so, if we pause for a moment and appreciate it, and if we feel unnecessary tension and resistance, we can apply cause and effect reflection. We can say, are we really thinking about our experiences from the perspective of ideal? Or are we thinking about it from the perspective of apparent contradictions or denial by the senses? See, I see the world as integral, five sensory integration with the sixth sense, the inner to the outer, and I'm one with this world. And what I found was this really occurred by making peace with certain kinds of thinking processes. And it started with mere assumption. I assume myself to be the one that is accepted. I assume this journey to get easier each day because I made that psychological change within myself. And change happens effortlessly because change happens in mind based on thinking. Now, I also recognize that for certain things, I found this to be more challenging to accept. And I also found that with certain things, it was easier. That's why he suggests the following. The world moves with motiveless necessity. But this has meant that it has no motive of its own, but is under the necessity of manifesting your concept, the arrangement of your mind. And your mind is always arranged in the image of all you believe and consent to as true. So, if you see the world as motiveless necessity, we recognize that we're the ones assigning the meaning from within. We're giving it the interpretation. If you believe the world puts you down, it's too difficult and complicated, is out to get you and sabotages you, then we work with mere assumption, the psychological equivalent of least action, and it changes. Letting go of certain kinds of thinking like this can be a process, and we want to make peace with it and say it's okay. But perhaps some doubts might creep in the earlier stages because we haven't made peace with them, or we haven't had the ability to look beyond the perspective of those doubts, recognizing that we're assigning the meaning from within, what we say I am too, such as people criticize me and put me down, it's too difficult and complicated, there are factors beyond my control. See, we don't add any of that kind of meaning. We say I am this and it's done. I have a desire, I have a hunch, I have an expression that I want to see in reality, I'm going to go do it. So you go and do it. You make the video. That video, as soon as I put it out there, ended up becoming popular, and so started the channel. Now, I noticed this kind of stuff happening with many areas of my life as I continue to identify with the perspectives that we have been discussing. So we know then that the change is really happening within. If I track this back and I want to get to the root of it, the source is within myself. And, I've been studying this stuff for many years, and all of this discussions in relation to personal development, information we talk about, is in one way or another saying the same thing, that it's going back to what we identify with, what we say I am to, I am being the cause. So we have the power to, with the power of I am, identify with anything, absolutely anything. We call upon the power of I am by saying I am this, I am that, although we might say things unconsciously. We say acceptance of the end wills the means. We can say I am wills the means. Nothing can be greater beyond I am. Because when you say I am to this, I am to that, I am to certain kinds of thinking, although a person might not directly say I am, people criticize me and put me down because from a best practice English perspective, that's not the way we communicate. But we are unconsciously adding the I am there. Now, I'd like to reflect upon this with you in relation to a story that happened over the last few years in regards to management consulting. So I always see everything as this one long journey, as life is this theater that plays out and one thing leads to the next. Very flow-based. And so what ended up happening was in 2016, I had a desire that I wanted to go live in Los Angeles for a year. And the most that you're, what they say, allowed to be there is 6 months. So I said, I got to figure it out some way, somehow. And I realized that the client that I was working with, one of my consulting clients, had an opportunity for me to be down there, do some initiatives down there while I was doing my other stuff as well. I said, what if I can find a visa? And there was one visa that I qualified for, and it's called the Management Consulting TN visa. I always like to relate everything. One thing leads to the next. As far as my qualifications go, that was the only one that I qualified for. And it was said to be one of the hardest to get in on because you need all this experience. But looking back at my records, I realized I had all the experience. I had the years in consulting, the time in corporate, which translated into a whole bunch of it, management consulting, operational efficiency consulting, and so forth. And I'm getting the visa, going down there. Now, principle of least action. See, one thing leads to the next. There was no overthinking. It was just mere assumption. I'm going to get there some way, somehow. And then you happen to find it. Now, some might say, well, that was already there. Those things were there. The visa was there. Such is the aspects on the entrepreneur journey for creating success. The clients are there. The business is there. The market is there. The opportunities are there. The operational help is there. The automation's there. The delegation is there. The understanding of what to eliminate so you can be more effective is there. It's all there. The ability to find it happens via the power of the subconscious mind in a very flow-based way. And the way to encourage this is to practice each day, looking beyond, apparent, as he says, apparent. That's the key word, apparent. Contradictions, antagonisms, and contrasts of your life. There's only one principle at work. Only your consciousness operating, what we say I am to, which is the cause substance, and the journey from one state of mind to another, which is the causative factor, which allows you to find the opportunities, the different aspects of the journey, the clients, the business, whatever it is by taking the psychological equivalent of least action as far as step goes, mere assumption. Now, this is a lot easier for someone who trusts in their imagination, who believes in the power of the subconscious mind, who understand how it works, who can allow themselves to look beyond the five sensory evidence and mere assume it as the way it is. But if you're like me, and I've been on this journey for a while, then in the earlier stages, I used to think way too much, overthinking. I used to be so heavily identified with the five sensory experience that I looked at imagination as just imagination. Something that's there, but it's not really the cause. It's something that can be used as a cause, but what we say I am too, as the cause, then what ends up happening is we live in and from it. The psychological equivalent of least action, mere assumption. So how do we practice this? Let's go a little deeper into this. Like with a lot of things, if a person overthinks, a little bit more so every day. And working with the power of the subconscious mind. Change the beliefs around in whatever shape or form you got to do it. We have to let go of certain beliefs. Because those beliefs seem to spawn out as certain thoughts, doubts, indecision, frustration, and this and that internally, which seems to cause unnecessary doubt that we could just accept an idea. One of the ways to help this, and I mentioned this all throughout the videos that helped me, was the repetition of the same information and the repetition of the same information from different perspectives. That means that I continue to encourage this kind of thinking within myself. I listen to certain information that encourages this kind of thinking. As I was on the entrepreneurial journey, I was finding myself more so around entrepreneurs who had the results, who achieved the goals. And I would allow myself to think what they were thinking because they were believing things to be the way it was. But from my perspective, I had to accept it as an assumption. You know what? I could accept that idea. I could accept the idea that whatever shows up, I could delegate, automate, eliminate it, or optimize it in some shape or form. I could do it. I could also believe that it could be easier. I don't have to believe that right now it has to be super easy, but I could be open to the idea that over the course, it'll get easier. And so it started to create all these changes within me. And it continues to till this day because one of my favorite things to do is the cause and effect reflection. I just observe each day. If I get any kind of doubt, fear-based interpretation, I don't have a problem with doubt or fear. I don't. Because if I have a challenge with it in a way that I put it on some kind of pedestal and say that it has power over me, then that's my own interpretation. That's my own assumption. So I experience that conflict in my mind accordingly. All I do is I just note down the doubt-based thinking. And you don't have to do this all day long, as needed. And just remember that the five sensory interpretation from the perspective of the vision realized implies as confirmation. And thus there is less reactivity, if any. And a person maintains that loyalty to their vision, loyalty to the unseen reality. So I just look at it and say, what's a different perspective? Which is why I love to interact with different people and study different information from those that have produced the results because they think in a certain way. I like to collect, you could say, perspectives from different sources because that's repetition of the same information from different perspectives, which I could readily and easily associate to any kind of doubt-based thinking that shows up. I'll say, oh, wait a second, this doubt here of it being too difficult and complicated, I learned this other perspective that in relation to my business or in relation to different aspects of the journey of the entrepreneurial path, I could automate, delegate, eliminate it, run it through a filter. I actually have that filter. One of my favorite filters is with the things that I do each day. And I've shared this with all of my clients, which is pretty much like you could say the premise of my management consulting, is just pausing in regards to whatever kind of unnecessary complex thinking, force-based thinking, and say, can this be optimized? Can this be delegated? Can this be automated? Can this be eliminated in part or in whole or in combination? That's it. And right then and there, I stimulate an idea or a perspective or a way of doing things. We do it together. I do it within myself, and we make it happen. We do the thing. One can just have that as a mere assumption to switch into the state of mind because, as we mentioned, five sensory interpretation in regards to the vision or from the premise of the wish fulfilled will bring us into certain states of mind because it implies. So, psychological equivalent of least action. And the psychological equivalent is mere assumption. So I assume whatever challenge shows up on the journey, well, this could probably be automated, delegated, eliminated, or optimized in some shape or form. Now that does it for me. That's my kind of inner dialogue. This comes from my, you could say, systems background, management consulting background, operational background, which is why I also love this quote here. When he says the principle of least action governs everything in physics from the path of a planet to the path of a pulse of light, least action is the minimum of energy multiplied by the minimum of time. This gets me excited because I'm very much interested in logistics. When I worked in corporate IT, I did warehouse management systems, and it was distribution centers, logistics. I'm interested genuinely in logistics. I actually watch documentaries, Amazon fulfillment. I love watching documentaries since I was a kid. So, this relates to one thing leading to the next and what you really love to do and all the things that we talk about. And I want to further encourage this in the upcoming videos. But the big takeaway here is really the recognition that change really can happen effortlessly. And things do flow from mere assumption. And although maybe in the earlier stages, we may have a hard time believing or identifying with certain thinking, the repetition of the same information or the repetition of the same information from different perspectives will start to reveal it more so, and then when we see it, we can understand it, the confirmation. In reality, we can further encourage it. We call this gratitude or appreciation. When we see a slight change as a result of the thinking within, we acknowledge the change. We say, look, it's happening. The change is occurring. My reality is rearranging to reflect my vision. So I trust you found this video to be helpful. Let's further encourage this in harmony and contribution to your vision, because all is. You could say, I recognize that all is in harmony and in contribution to my vision. I'm able to see it more so via the equivalent of least action, which is my psychological journey from one state to another via assumption. I have the power to assume what is ideal and in harmony and in contribution to my vision. As a result of mere assumption, I'm able to see things for how they really are and be able to transcend past certain interpretations, beliefs, perspectives. Now I'm able to identify what is true and in harmony with my vision. This brings forth a higher degree of internal peace, harmony. As I realize that things move in a way that is known and unknown to bring forth my vision from a perspective of flow, I'm able to recognize this more so and thus automatically find information from the same perspective and information from different perspectives that say the same thing, which encourage the assumptions of love, peace, and harmony in contribution to my vision. If you would like a copy of this mind map, the link is in the description. Thank you very much for watching. I'll talk to you soon. Take care.